Startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Kastner.
And I'm Caitlin Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by mug.news.
Today's ecosystem builder is Jamie Sundsbak from Rochester, Minnesota. Jamie serves as the executive director for Collider Foundation, which is a nonprofit that's dedicated to supporting local entrepreneurs in Rochester. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us.
That's awesome to be here.
Yes, I am very much looking forward to the conversation. It's been on the calendar for a couple of weeks now, so I'm eager to get going. But to start with, could you describe Collider and just kind of, I guess, give an overview of how you're supporting entrepreneurs locally?
Collider Foundation is a 501c3 based here in Rochester, Minnesota. We focus on early stage entrepreneurs. So instead of saying we help just high tech companies or med tech companies, which Rochester is known for with the Mayo Clinic, we really take that an approach on how can we help early stage companies. So anybody that's in ideation phase, all the way to probably a couple years into their company, that's sort of the sweet spot of where we can come in and really help by providing early stage assistance. So that could just be helping to connect them to the sources of funding. That could be helping them to develop and vet their idea into a viable business, finding that product market fit, as well as many other things that we do. But really trying to keep it with that early stage entrepreneur in mind, because we would love to see more and more companies continue to grow in our city.
It seems like there's like multiple components to this, and it's like part co-working space, part startup incubator. Is that a good, I guess, mix between the two?
Yeah, we actually started off as a for-profit co-working space. That's what lured me away from the work I was doing at the Mayo Clinic to really take an active role in the community. We didn't have enough great spaces for people to gather and collaborate, especially in the entrepreneurial realm. And as a former entrepreneur, I wanted to see a space like that exist. So co-working was sort of the first thing we did. But the more we started providing a great space for people to work, we saw that they didn't necessarily have the help and support that they needed in the very early stages. So that's where the idea for the nonprofit came from. And really what we did with the nonprofit is we absorbed the operations of the co-working space and still believe that space is the best way to sort of get people together. That's why we called it Collider. We wanted these people to be colliding every day, sparking new ideas and excitement for the businesses that they do. But we also provide early stage education. In fact, we're running a class starting next week for 8 weeks called The Basics of Entrepreneurship, which basically help you go from idea to your first 10 customers. And then we also do events. So events are so important in an ecosystem. So we've been traditionally the home of big events like Startup Weekend. We're one of the co-hosts of A Million Cups Rochester. But we also do sort of events that are more home brewed. So we do a pitch competition here, which we lovingly call Walleye Tank. That's a life science pitch competition for emerging companies. So we do a lot of those great feel-good events. And then one of the things we did in the very early days is we felt that the entrepreneur stories weren't being told in our communities. So we acquired an online news site called Rochester Rising, which was another local startup here in Rochester, to really help them continue to tell those inspirational stories of the entrepreneurs in our community. So in aggregate, that's kind of what we do here at Collider.
And it seems like Collider's hitting so many of the vital, I guess, points of an ecosystem, from storytelling to that the educational support to the networking events. So it's a fascinating and, I guess, unique organization that I haven't quite came across one entity doing all those sorts of things.
The beautiful thing about Rochester is we're not a giant town. I think the last census put us at about 106,000 people. And you think that right in the middle, and we're not in the Twin Cities, we're actually parked about 90 miles south here in southern Minnesota. And one of the beautiful things about that is we have something that many other places, many other towns our size doesn't have, which is a world-class medical center plopped right into our downtown in the Mayo Clinic. And that has created a lot of amazing opportunities here in our community for entrepreneurs, for small businesses. and for a lot of individuals, and of course, a lot of visitors to the clinic who seek help for medical conditions and whatnot. So it's a unique place. So we thought, well, I've been a student of entrepreneurial ecosystem building for about 8 years. I got hooked with Brad Feld's book, Startup Communities, and that got me going on this pathway. And so, we just decided to bite off as big a piece as we could chew, and try to support our local entrepreneurs. And, I would hope that I always look at Collider. My vision is Collider is sort of the jumper cables to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We would love to see others step up, and we've seen people start to step up and really help contribute to the ecosystem. But in the early days, it was only a few of us who are really doing this work. So we decided to take on as much as we could, provide a great example of how a maturing ecosystem could really be operationalized and supported. And then our hope is in the next 5 or 10 years that maybe there won't even be a need for an organization like Collider. We'll see entrepreneurs becoming successful. And really, I always say that flywheel of entrepreneurship will start to turn. And I always say my favorite thing is to say I'd like to actually talk myself out of a job in a few years. And I think that's when I'll know that our ecosystem is mature and that amazing things are happening every day. And it's not just the result of 1 or 2 organizations here in town.
Yes, yeah, I love the vision casting, Jamie. How is the Mayo Clinic at collaborating and working with startups? And I ask because there's a bunch of communities throughout the Midwest where there's one, I guess, pillar of economic development with, and a lot of times that is like a very bureaucratic institution. And I kind of assume the Mayo Clinic being as old and prestigious and the industry it's in, probably fits that mold. Do you have any advice for the other ecosystem builders working with that one institution?
So I would say patience. And I'm not saying patience as in 6 months. I'm saying patience as in, a number of years. Something that we were fortunate enough to get a Ewing, Marion Kaufman grant a couple of years ago for our organization to help underrepresented entrepreneurs in our community. And one of the things that we learned was, and we learned this way later than we should have with this grant, is trust building. So whether it's an underrepresented entrepreneur or this, crazy big organization that's a worldwide leader in healthcare, you've got to build that trust. You've got to take those meetings with individuals. You've got to share your vision. And quite honestly, 8 years ago, Mayo wasn't all that interested in entrepreneurship or startups. They were more interested in licensing intellectual property to the coasts. They wanted people here to focus on providing a great product, which is a great healthcare experience with great outcomes. And they didn't have a lot of time for that other stuff in entrepreneurship. And, throughout the years, there's been a lot of people within the organization and without that have had those critical conversations with an organization like Mayo Clinic and just said, we've got to start realizing that medicine doesn't go from a researcher with a promising idea to a patient. So we used to call that bench to bedside. It actually goes from bench to business to bedside, because you've got to create a business that sells those products into healthcare institutions. So that business component was very, very critical to delivering quality healthcare to patients. So I think that's when Mayo sort of reversed a lot of its old kind of stodgy rules about entrepreneurship and really embraced entrepreneurship in the community and said, this is a vital part of our mission as well as the community of Rochester. So we've been really fortunate to, be around during that time to help, in any way we can, supporting entrepreneurs coming out of Mayo Clinic, as well as, Mayo has traditionally been a very difficult organization to work with for startups. I remember when I was inside of Mayo, we worked on a project to bring Techstars here as an accelerator, but putting startup people with corporate people sometimes doesn't really mix well when the cultures are so different. So, but I think now Mayo's embraced it a lot more. They have some amazing projects on the front burner now instead of the back burner. So we have 2 co-working spaces in town that we operate. One of them is completely filled by Google. So Google has come into our town of 100,000 people and set up the first Google office in Minnesota right here in Rochester, not in the Twin Cities, but Rochester. And they're working with Mayo Clinic on taking all of their health data and cleaning it up and then transferring up to the cloud, a private instance of the cloud that Mayo owns. And then they get to start to derive these useful insights and products that are very data-driven, which Mayo traditionally has not done in the past. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for not only companies coming out of Mayo Clinic, a large variety of health tech companies that may want to interface now with Mayo to utilize their data. What an amazing thing if you're trying to do some machine learning and you need a training set to know that you don't have to go around to 14 different organizations, hospitals, other academic research institutions, do all these agreements and then just get a janky set of data that has to be cleaned up and whatever. You can go to Mayo and you can say, I need quality x-rays from 90,000 individuals, and with a simple data access agreement, boom, there you have them. They can transfer them over. So I think it's a hidden gem that's starting to emerge, especially on the health tech front. So I'm really excited about not only what comes out of Mayo, but who can we bring here? How many interesting startups that probably won't, move from Silicon Valley to here, but they may have an office here. They may employ some people here. And that's really, really exciting when, we talk about developing more companies here in the Midwest. And I'm really bullish on what Mayo's doing and really bullish on just the whole sort of ecosystem here in Rochester. It's a really exciting time to be a part of this journey.
Yes, yeah, and healthcare has been there's been such a huge focus placed on healthcare in the last 2 months for obvious reasons, and that perspective I also think is interesting for people whose economy isn't, I guess, pinned to healthcare. That the whole patients, the relationship and like being patient is just a very, very good tidbit to pick up. Jamie, what's one thing people from the outside may not know about Rochester? And you've already hit on a few, but is there something that really sticks out that, like, as an outsider such as myself, who I've yet to go to Rochester? I'll put it on the list though after kind of.
Yeah, you're always welcome.
Perfect. Good to know. What's something I may not know about the community?
I think it's amazing how, when you have a large industry like a Mayo Clinic dedicated to service to the patient, how much that infects the community. So the culture of this giant organization, which employs almost a third of our entire population in the city, really comes out. So that generosity, that spirit of caring, that spirit of helping. And we've seen the benefits of that, not only within our own organization with donations and support, but also just people on the street who are just generally want to help you. It is really one of the most friendly communities in the United States that I've ever lived in. So that's one thing. The second thing is we're part of something called Destination Medical Center, which is a $6.8 billion effort to really turn Rochester into a center for health, for wellness, as well as hopefully on selfishly for me, business development. So we're seeing a transformation of our downtown, some amazing spaces and buildings being created all around that idea of, we draw almost, it's like 2.5 million visitors here a year for care at Mayo Clinic. It's just how can we continue to build on that tradition of helping people and really drawing them in to a destination for health and wellness. So I think those are the two things: super friendly population and just this amazing opportunity to really build amazing new businesses and amazing new things, all in the name of helping patients who are coming here for medical treatment.
Yes, it sounds like it has Midwest vibes for sure. Just
it does.
All right, Jamie. So we have some, I guess, quick hitting questions to rattle through. Is there one or a handful of coffee shops that entrepreneurs really hang out in?
So I would definitely say Cafe Steam is our go-to coffee shop. It was started actually in part by some of my co-founders with the co-working space in Collider. So I'm saying this because I know the owners, but also because truly in downtown Rochester, there are now 3 locations for Cafe Steam. I would say besides our co-working space, it's really where people sit down, have a great cup of coffee, and just exchange great ideas. And that was really the whole hope behind the coffee shop. And Will Forsman, who's the person who runs the space, is a genius when it comes to anything from innovative new coffee to just the vibe and feel of each location, which is a little bit different. So definitely anyone who comes to the community, check out Cafe Steam.
Okay, perfect. Adding it to my list. You mentioned a few events that Collider puts on. Is there like a website or one central location where someone could go learn about all the local events in Rochester?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to collider.mn, you can, I think it's events and education tab. You pull it down there, you'll see all of our events and education, as well as we're fortunate enough to be part of a collective called the E1 or Entrepreneurs First Network here in Southern Minnesota. It's basically a loose federation of all the ecosystem building organizations in Southern Minnesota who kind of work together to help each other out. So not only by going to Collider's page are you going to see what specifically Collider's doing, but you're going to see what our entire network across Southern Minnesota is doing for events and education, which I think is a really cool thing. And it's super inclusive of our entire region and not just the big city, which is Rochester here in Southern Minnesota. Is
there one or maybe a few startups that really stand out as like the most successful or that have scaled to the, I guess, highest point? What's the most successful startup?
Well, it always depends, right? And there's very, very different levels and how you would measure that. So, I think the one that stands out in the life sciences for me is a company called Viriad. They work on basically some anti-cancer treatments that they're developing. They started from a small lab at Mayo Clinic and actually grew into this space, which is known as the Mayo Clinic Business Accelerator, and then moved on to creating a giant lab space and production space out at. We're also home of an IBM campus. So there's some space out there that they're renting. So they're doing very, very well. I think they're in a Series A or Series B, but they're continuing to just make innovative new products. I would say on the selfish side, within our co-working space about 2.5 years ago, there were 2 guys who just sort of got together, started talking, and actually created a startup called Sherpa. And Sherpa is an amazing sort of company that allows you to what they call explore local. So they create these amazing itineraries about local events and things going on in the community, local restaurants. And they sort of string together these amazing experiences for locals and tourists who can come in and say, I never thought of going to that coffee shop and then going to that restaurant. And then after that, going to one of our favorite ice cream places to hang out. They're sort of doing this. They've caught on there. I think they're in like 47 different communities across the upper Midwest now, creating these experiences and adventures for locals and visitors. They're by no means, at that top tier. They're sort of, I would say, even pre-seed at this point, but they're getting amazing traction. And I just love the story that, 2 people could collide in our space, work with us on our education and training, and then graduate to do great things with their startup.
Yes, yeah, that is an inspiring story, Jamie. You mentioned the rounds of funding. What is the venture capital scene like in Rochester? Is it close enough to the Twin Cities that some trickles in, or?
Yeah, we definitely, there is no venture capital fund here in Rochester, although there's a lot of entrepreneurs sort of saying we should have one. I think that happens typically, historically in communities after a big exit. We haven't had a big exit yet, so I'm hoping that will come. We do have angel funds, and that's been going really, really well. I think they've seeded about, it's like $2 million worth of funding in the last couple of years to startups. So that's going well, but you did hit it on the head. We are 90 miles south of the Twin Cities. So there are an amazing plethora of venture groups up there. And so we work to maintain strong relationships with them. And then, on the Collider side of things, if we see someone who feels like they should be at that point, we try to make those introductions. And then most importantly, get them up there to start having those conversations.
How many, I guess, news outlets that we already touched on storytelling and Collider having a storytelling unit, but are there any local blogs or podcasts or traditional media that does a very good job at covering the new business?
So our local newspaper, the Post Bulletin, does a great job. A gentleman, a reporter named Jeff Kiger, who really covers the business beat. He has for ever since I moved here, and probably 10 years, about 20 years, and really is excellent at being a persistent person when it comes to really figuring out what's going on in our community. So he does some great work, just really with some reporting. And then we have another organization called the Med City Beat, which really covers a lot of civic stuff and arts, but they do a lot of occasional business reporting and things like that. Other than that, though, that's kind of what we have in our community. That's why Amanda Leitner, who started Rochester Rising, felt the need for that, because we wanted to be less about reporting and more about storytelling, just allowing the entrepreneurs to tell the stories in their own words. So Amanda has done a great job with producing original articles each week, but also producing, I think she's on, I think it's like episode 240 of her podcast. I mean, she's done an amazing body of work talking to entrepreneurs all over this community for the last 5 years. So it's definitely, she is the expert. She's the one who always helps me get through podcast interviews, right? And she does a great job. And I just really love her energy and really can't say enough about her dedication to really this cause of promoting entrepreneurs here in the Rochester area.
As a fellow podcaster, 240 episodes is a lot of episodes. I'm impressed. So props to her. Jamie, last question for you. If I were to move to the community tomorrow and wanted to start a business, what's the very first thing I should do?
Well, selfishly, I'd tell you to go to Collider. So I guess if you move here, first of all, trying to what we basically say, find the on-ramp to the ecosystem. And typically, that's not Collider right away. That's literally going into a great coffee shop like Cafe Steam and saying, hey, I'm starting a business here. Who should I talk to? Same with local restaurants. And I think people in the know will refer you to our economic development folks, or Collider or a few other places, but it'll only take about 1 or 2 connections to get you back to us. And that's where we want to just be able to help. If you're a mature business, we can route you to our economic development folks, our Chamber of Commerce, or if you're looking for employees, we can definitely get you to the right people for that. So that's really our dream, is to be that one-stop shop for those people that coming into town saying they're going to set up a business or have an existing business. We just want to get them to the right resources at the right time. That's what we do.
Amazing, Jamie. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was fascinating to hear about all the work you're doing. And I look forward to staying in touch and hearing how this grows in the future.
Well, thank you so much. And as an avid listener of the podcast, it's exciting to be on it. So thank you very much. This is awesome.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from the person building it, I'm going to link back up with Caitlin to clarify some jargon and take a deeper dive into this community.
Hey, Nick, how was your conversation with Jamie?
Caitlin, first off, it is great to see you.
Yes.
Yes, and my conversation with Jamie was amazing. He is just good people. He reminds me of like so many community leaders and builders that we talk to, of just like being dedicated to seeing his community succeed. And that's really the type of like ecosystem builder that makes the world go round. So it was great to connect with Jamie. Wonderful, wonderful conversation.
So was that your biggest takeaway to start us off?
So my biggest takeaway with him being from Rochester, I find the whole Mayo Clinic, like the relationship the startup community has with the Mayo Clinic, I just think that's an interesting dynamic. And I touched on this in the interview, but there's so many communities that have that one major player where their whole economy kind of centers around that. And I grew up in a very small town in western Nebraska that Sidney, Nebraska, and was home to Cabela's, which was a Fortune 500 company. It was valued and bought for $5 billion. And so like there were 7,000 people in my town growing up, and Cabela's employed 2,000 people in the town. So major employer. And the relationship the Rochester startup community has with the Mayo Clinic reminded me a lot of my hometown. But I think there's a bunch of communities like that across the country where you have to work, like you really want to work with that one major player, but they don't always make it the easiest to do. And I thought Jamie provided just really, really good, tangible advice of like, be patient, but still persevere. So that was probably my biggest takeaway, and one that it was one of those conversations, Caitlin, that, you know, what we've now done, like 35 of these, I guess. And, I will remember this one because, like, I will remember that tidbit.
Well, and I actually didn't know that it was your hometown that was kind of the Cabela's hub. I didn't know that was where you were from.
Yeah, yes. I've mentioned the Western Nebraska play a few times, but yeah, Cabela's, baby, Cabela's.
Yeah, because I remember, and then because you'd mentioned Cabela's, Frank and Kim Spillers, we had a conversation on on the episode I had with them, and they were like giving us the full example of like good entrepreneurship and like communication within groups, and I was like, oh, it's all coming together. It's all coming together.
Full circle, baby, full circle. Just the way we like.
Oh, absolutely. So then after your interview, did you have anything that you needed to look up afterwards?
Collider has like a tech news site kind of similar to mug.news, but except it's much like it just covers the Rochester community, and his organization's doing so much stuff that that was, I guess, again, just refreshing and interesting to look at. But was there any like term or thing I'd look up? No. But I did creep on his website some more.
Well, super. So before we close out, did you have any final thoughts?
The value of co-working spaces and the whole collisions. So I just got back from a networking event, and I just ran into some people, and it was nice and reminded me the value of like being in person. And there's certain aspects like going back in the office I'm kind of groaning at. I don't really want to like commute every day, and but I think I can get through that type of stuff. But there is value to being in person was where I was going, and co-working spaces provide that. So that's probably my last major takeaway, Caitlin. Would you like to read us out?
I do, and I also want to just do a little bit of input. So I'm from Stripville, which is 15 minutes away from Rochester, so it was really cool to get to hear that you're like, oh, Rochester. I'm like, oh, well, I happen to know where that is. And then...
Because I knew you were from around there. It is funny that we're both like Midwestern kids interviewing all these ecosystem builders across the Midwest. That is...
but like co-working space, actually, if you're ever in Rochester, really check out Cafe Steam. Is a super cool Rochester native. Wait, did you meet someone from Cafe Steam?
No, he said he plugged Cafe Steam in the interview. That is so funny. That is so funny.
I guarantee he probably talked about the co-working space I was going to recommend then. What
was it? I bet he started it. Is it called Collider?
I think it might be. I think... That is the funniest thing. I didn't know that he started it. Yeah, he started it as listen to the entire conversation is very, it's good. But we'll have to meet in Rochester sometime, Caitlin, and you give me the whole tour. I have no reason to go because you're the local tour guide. I'll go on my Airbnb or whatever whatever. And there's also some local app developed there that's like the Airbnb experiences where you can like book things, and it's developed in Rochester. Oh my god, I just talked to him. What's the freaking name of the app he just talked about? Dang it! But anyway, we can go book on the app and explore Rochester together. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, yeah, that sounds like a plan. What a small world. This is crazy, but I will read ahead and read us out. If you have any last stuff?
No, this was good banter. This was fun banter. So yes,
this was a good one.
Yeah, thank you for logging on. But feel free to read us out.
All right, right on. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder podcast, which is a product of mug.news, hosted by Nick Kastner and Caitlin Clays. If you have any questions about today's episode, connect with us at Twitter at Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at Mug News Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. We release episodes every Wednesday morning, so make sure to follow so you don't miss a beat.
Follow, baby. See you Wednesday.